Well,
That's
I don't,
my alt account. I just have
I'm
off.
just here to watch.
Oh, I didn't.
it's not like
Oh,
it's not like I have all the time in the world. So I'll just give the argument, and then whatever defense you have, you can just tell me or refutation. But premise one, if the fetus is just the same entity as a future person, then any fatal harm done currently will deprive it of significant future goods. Premise two, if harming the fetus deprives it of significant future goods, then given the moral principle, do not multiply harm beyond necessity. An action which causes harm to the fetus, prima facie, must be lesser in amount than the harm which would morally occur which would occur otherwise, for it to be morally justified. Premise three, if an action which causes if an action which causes harm must prima facie be lesser in amount than the harm which would occur otherwise to be justified, then abortion is morally unjustified, right? And then the conclusion is just like if P then if P then R. It's just a hypothetical syllogism, but um, is there any part you disagree with?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just modus tollens the argument by saying, well, if being the same entity as, a human in the future is enough for moral value, then it seems like you're going to want to say that, um, the ovum itself would also have moral value. And I know the
Why is
ovum
that
doesn't have
true?
moral value. Is that true? Do you want an
Hmm.
argument for it?
I mean, you can give a motivation or reason, but sure.
Okay. Well, is this a future like ours argument?
No, I don't hold to any physicalist theories in terms of like what's it called, in terms of personal identity. So no, but I just hold the
Physicalist
view that they're
theories of personal
relatively
identity.
identical. Yeah,
Relatively, what does that mean? Also, can
they're
you
just
type out the argument inside chat?
sure. Like I have it by memory, but I'll just quickly type this out.
Okay.
This should maybe be valid, hopefully. I formalized it off memory. There's a prima facie clause somewhere. I just forgot to write it out. But um yeah. But why is it the case that if that was true we'd need to value the ovum?
Because I take the ovum to be the same entity, based on whatever semantic criteria you use to assert the zygote is the same entity.
I mean, well, the zygote is this okay, well the zygote is the same entity as itself in the future due to it like having the same soul and due to it having the same sort of genetic makeup as it does as its future self. So they're just relatively identical in both of those two cases.
The same soul. Can I get
Hmm.
some semantics on soul?
Soul is just a first person bearer of experiences, which is simple, not comprised of parts. It is capable of having experiences, but it itself is not comprised of experiences. So or composed,
Soul.
sorry.
Okay, soul kind of seems more like an assertion rather than a definition. Like it is the first person bearer. Um, it seems like you're kind of gonna want to say that the zygote is a soul, right?
Well, no, because I don't take any physical objects to be bearers of experiences in the same sense I'm talking about a soul. Maybe the physical body would just be whatever entity which is allowing for these experiences to be actualized, or like it's allowing for these experiences to be actualized or give some connection between the soul and the external world. But I don't take the soul to be identical to the fetus. Like, nah.
Okay,
Like I
well,
don't think.
it really seems like you're gonna want to update your definition of soul if it asserts that, it is the same entity. Like when I ask
Hmm.
you for a soul, rather than telling me semantics that include the zygote, it seems like you're gonna want to say that the zygote more has a property of the soul, which is distinct from the zygote, not just asserting that, oh, it is the same entity as something in the future.
Well, it is the same entity insofar as it having this specific identical property which is unique to itself. So, like, I don't know, like, I thought that was clear from what I said initially. They're the same insofar as they both have the same soul, right? And insofar as they both have the same genetic makeup, so they're just relatively identical, like, index to those two sortals.
Okay, I don't think you understand the problem that I'm levying. I'm not even falsifying the fact that it has a soul. I'm telling you that your semantics leads to the zygote being a soul based off of what you told me a soul is.
Why
So
is it
rather than defining, So rather than defining a soul as saying something like, "Oh, it is the same entity as something in the future," or "X is the same thing as Y," um, that's going to include X and Y. At least it seems like X and Y are going to be just considered the soul, rather than X and Y having a property known as the soul. I want semantics for the property.
Well, specifically, I don't know why it would include be inclusive of the zygote because I just take it to be the case that zygotes have souls. So they have this simple entity which is the first person bearer of experiences. But they themselves are not identical to this first person bearer, right? In the same sort of way how I can say that I am experiencing things insofar as I have this specific sort of faculty, being the soul, which is the first person bearer, but I myself am not identical or like on my physical body, I should say, right? In both of these two cases, is not identical to it. So, like on my view, I don't take it to be the case that souls or like any sort of physical object can be identical. Right, even on my own semantics, I don't take it that any sort of physical object can be a first-person bearer of experiences. Rather, I take it that any sort of physical object, right, must be in possession of these sort of specific properties, right? And this property being the soul. So whenever I say it's the same entity as is in the future, all I'm saying there is just that it has this same property, which is why I invoked relative identity, like at the start of the argument.
Okay, your semantics are pretty weird because now you're saying, okay, well, it has to be the same entity, and the property would just be like being a first person bearer of experiences, right?
Um, yeah.
Okay, being the first person bearer of experiences,
Oh
that's
no,
what the soul
having
is, but
was.
that's not even the zygote is, right?
Oh well, okay. Well, I should rephrase that. Well, the property specifically would be having this faculty or this this I should say substance, which is the first person bearer of experiences. I should say. Maybe that'll clear it up. So
Okay,
it, like
having
we can just say
okay,
like a
the
soul is a non-physical substance, right? Like physical simple entity or substance, which is the first person bearer of experience. I thought that was clear, but yeah.
Okay, it's not clear because it's also still not clear whether the zygote is the soul because now we have a set of properties. It's the for having the property of this faculty, which is first person bearer of experiences, is that
Uh-huh.
property itself the soul, or is
Hmm?
that just the zygote? Because
Okay,
I think you're going to want to say that that is the zygote,
hold on.
but you're also
So
telling me
is
that the
that
zygote's not
property
the
the
soul.
faculty you said?
You said it's having this faculty, like the
Yeah.
zygote has this faculty, which
Mhm.
is first person bearer of experiences.
No,
And it
that's not what I said. So the zygote has this specific sort of faculty, and the faculty is this immaterial, like simple entity, which is the bearer of experiences. So it has
yeah,
this
that's what I
entity
said.
within it, right? In which that is in a causal relation with it.
That's
Right?
exactly what I just said.
How is that? How is that identical to me claiming that that thing in which it has a causal relation with is identical to the entity itself?
Because okay, I don't think you remember the motivation that I gave earlier, but I asked you previously, what is your definition of soul? How are you cashing that out? And then
Hmm.
you described a soul as being the same thing in the future. So it's actually not
No,
the
that's not what
zygote
I
that is the
said.
same. That is what you said. So it's actually not the zygote holding being the same thing in the future, which is what you're going to want to say. I think for your argument, you're going to want to say that the zygote is going to be the same as the thing in the future, and so vicariously would just give it more value. But instead, it's actually not the zygote that is the same thing in the future. It's just that the zygote has this soul, and the semantics of soul is just the
Okay.
faculty of which it is a first person experience bearer.
Okay, yeah, so that's just the confusion. So whenever I say like specifically one, I started out by saying that the thing that makes it like you asked me what makes it the same as it is in the future, and then I told you that it has the same soul, right? So you saying that okay, well, what I want to say is that the zygote is the same thing as it is in the future. Well, it's the same, like, and I've said this like 4 or 5 times now, but it's the same insofar as it having the same soul, and I'll repeat my semantics on soul. So a soul is a non-physical, simple substance, right? Which is the first person bearer of experiences, but it itself is not composed of experiences. So it is capable of having experiences, but any sort of experiences in which it has, right, are not parts which compose it in the sense that like, they're not essential attributes of it, right? So in that sort of context, right, then obviously the thing which would make it true such that the zygote is the same as it is in the future would be that it has the same soul, right? And I don't know where those sort of semantic that zygote and soul are overlapping in that context, because the zygote, as in the physical object, isn't the one having these experiences or having this some substance, right? Rather, like in the sense that it's a part of it. Rather, it's in a causal relation with this soul. Like I don't know, like I don't know what about that you don't understand it, but yeah.
Okay, what I'm not understanding is when I ask for motivation for why the zygote is the same thing in the future, telling me that it has the same property as something else in the future. Well, that's going to be also true for a
What did you say?
zygote and the ovum. Basically, I was telling you that when I asked you for motivation for why the zygote is going to be the same thing in the future, the motivations was just telling me, okay, well, we can have Z as the zygote, and then what should we? Well, we'll just say X for the soul. So Z
Mm-hmm.
has property X, and then future Z also has property X. I don't think that's enough to get you to the conclusion that Z and future Z are the same thing. Because if that goes through, then I could just tell you a property about the ovum that is still true about the zygote.
Yeah, you could say that. Okay, look, you could say that they're identical, they're the same insofar as the relative sense, right? Like, so for example, you imagine like it is the, well, actually, no, this is just a principle everyone evokes whenever they're talking about personal identity. Whenever we're speaking about personal identity, we aren't saying that I am the same entity over every single period in time, insofar as I have or the all of the properties which are true for me now are exactly the same as all of the properties which are true for me like 20 years in the future. We aren't saying anything like that. We're saying that the properties are the same insofar as this specific sort of category, right? So maybe you can say that they are identical insofar as some like category that you have. They just aren't relevant in whenever I'm like speaking to whether or not they're the same. Right? It is not the case that they have the same soul, and it is not the case that they have the same sort of genetic makeup, right? Then trivially, on my view, they just wouldn't be the same entity, because those are the sorts of things which I value and which I care about whenever I'm speaking about whether or not the sort of entity is the same. So,
Okay, I'm skeptical. I understand that category, but or I understand the separation of categories, but I'm very skeptical of whether or not, based on your semantics of what a soul is, it doesn't really seem like it's going to be exclusive of the ovum. So I guess what I want is for you to name the trait between the ovum and zygote, such that the zygote would have a soul and the future zygote would have the soul like a regular person would have the soul, but the ovum doesn't.
hmm? What are you asking me?
I'm asking you, what is true of the zygote that, if true, the ovum, both of them would have a soul?
This seems a bit of a burden shift, because the initial burden that you specifically placed on yourself, or the initial claim you specifically made, is that you don't see any sort of distinction, or there is no sort of distinction between like the zygote and between what's it called, between the ovum. And that was the sort of claim you made. So whenever you like try and ask me, okay, well, the trait that distinguishes the two of them, it's almost shifting the burden from the initial claim you made that there was no distinction, and then asking me to provide a distinction for you, right? When you were the one who made the claim. So, like, I just need to know specifically if you have any sort of motivation as to why we'd grant that these sort of things have souls. And even if I could say that maybe they do, like, even if I granted that, sure, maybe they do have souls, right? Like, it's unclear specifically whether or not they have the sort of the same sort of powers as they do like later on whenever they're like say a zygote, right? That's also unclear. But and they also still don't fulfill any of the other categories that I've laid out. So there's like three issues with the sort of claim you made already.
Okay, it seems like we have presented with us a lack of confidence in whether the zygote and the ovum both have a soul. We have lack of confidence in whether only the zygote has a soul. It seems like you kind of just lack confidence on whether you can even attribute the soul to exclusively the zygote or not, based off of your inability to answer my question. And not only that, it seems like we have some inexperience in the dialectical domain as well, because it's not a burden shift to say that, hey, look, I don't really see that much of a difference between a pig and a human. Can you tell me the trait that's true of the human, that if true, the pig, we would sanction both of them? That's not, under your view, that would be a burden shift, because the initial proposition was that I don't see a distinction between the pig and human. It actually makes sense to then ask, what is the difference? So that's essentially what I asked you. What is
Hmm.
the trait that is true of the zygote, that if true of the ovum, both of them would have that shoal? And once you realized your sort of dialectical ignorance there, then you decided to lower your credences. You decided to take away some confidence and say that maybe you could grant me that the ovum has a soul. and then you had to add another stipulation to it. So what I really just want is you to get a little bit more confidence in the proposition that the ovum
Yeah,
does not have a soul. If you want to concede that proposition, that'd be fine.
thanks for the posturing, but like it doesn't really matter. So the first thing you said is just already a confusion. If I looked at a pig and then looked at a human, and then I said, oh, well, I don't see any sort of distinction between the two. The sort of motivations I have for me not seeing a distinction between the two would be usually right. There are certain sort of properties which I can immediately identify about both, which are relevant within the specific sort of domain that we're speaking of, and then I compare the two based off of these sorts of observations and say that there is no apparent distinction off of comparing the two, right? So that is the sort of motivation that I'd give. And then, right, I could say that, okay, based off of this already high credences that we have, that there's no apparent distinction, then I can point at, or then I can point at the other person and say that, okay, well, now you need to give any sort of credence that there is a distinction, right? So, and trivially, you can just apply that to this case. You've given me no sort of motivation to believe that they are similar in any sort of relevant sense that I'm speaking of, right? And since you've given me no sort of motivation to believe that, then you just asking me why are they different? It just seems a bit of a burden shift. It's like me sitting here and asking you what's the relevant distinction between. Oh no, please, I claim that there's a distinction between you and Hitler, and then I ask you to prove that there isn't. Right? It's just like a textbook burden of proof fallacy. And for the thing about me like changing the categories, I've named these two categories from the very beginning of the discussion, and then you just choosing not to address them. It's just a blunder on your own part. Right? So like there's just two issues there already fundamentally. But yeah,
I actually I actually have addressed them so succinctly that you actually have to update your criteria of a soul, okay? That's just me updating it. Or I guess that's just me updating you on how the conversation went so far. And like, so I did address that. We can talk more about that, but there's just more dialectical confusion on your part. So when you have like the separation of categories of relevant features or salient categories, you're conflating those with like non-salient categories, and so it makes sense for somebody like you, somebody who's like very new to
repeat what you
debates such
said.
as yourself.
Sorry.
Okay, you're conflating salient categories with non-salient categories,
Somebody,
and so
no, somebody's
to
background noise is
to
drowning you.
yeah, and so to a layman such as yourself, I grant that it would seem strange to say that I don't see a difference between a pig and a human. What is the difference? To a layman such as yourself who doesn't understand salient categories versus non-salient categories, I mean that would be really weird. Obviously, the human has different properties, but the question was, I don't really see, or the proposition was, I don't really see any salient category distinction. So, I mean, I can give you some motivations because now that we've established that your only contention is true of not only just the salient categories, but the non salient categories as well. Well, I could just give an argument such as, like, well, I think that both the zygote and the ovum have a feature like ours. I mean, that would just be one property that is true about them. I mean, those seem pretty salient. And even if you don't grant that it's salient, well, that doesn't even matter to your initial contention because you clarified that you're not even specifically
But
talking about salient categories. So then I would just give an
mhm,
argument like, okay, well, premise one, a feature like ours equates to temporal data point on the x-axis of the fourth dimension where y
somebody is
is
still
greater than
drowning.
0, such that who's
Yeah, somebody's
Uzi
dog is
Hayas.
drowning you.
Oh my god. Okay.
Anyways,
So yeah, I'll just give
mhm.
this argument that well, first I'll make the assertion that the ovum has a feature like ours. I'll make the assertion that the zygote has a feature like ours, and I'll see if you disagree with any of that. But if you do agree with that, and then that is just trivially motivation for why they are the same thing.
Well, okay. Well, there's a few things. So one, when you say that they have a future like ours, I'd assume you mean that they have like identical to whatever entity that's like within the future as well. Like, and then it just be a question of okay, well, why is it the case that the ovum is identical? And then there's two. It's like obviously I know what like salient and non-salient categories are. Usually in the case in which whenever I speak or I compare a pig to a human, obviously it's true that there's some salient categories which are different. However, it's these salient categories aren't specifically the ones which we're immediately talking about, nor are they the relevant categories within the top of the discussion, right? Usually, whenever it comes to like a moral value, the sort of categories we're actually trying to like point out and pick out are non-salient insofar as they are like properties which we or categories which we cannot immediately able to notice. Which is why, upon introspection and upon actually trying to determine the sort of properties this thing has, right? Yeah, and after like verifying it and comparing these two to each other, then we can again do the exact same move that I said earlier, which is tell this person that we have lower credences for their view, because even upon reflection, both the salient and non-salient categories of these two are identical, or like they're at least relevantly similar, which is why we can then say, ask the other person to give it a relevant distinction. But in your case, you've not given any sort of motivation as to why the salient or non-salient categories are different or like are relevantly similar. And we know that they are not Jesus Christ, relevantly similar because one of them has 23 chromosomes, the other one does not, right? Obviously, that's like an immediately just one like salient category that we can distinguish them by. But I need the motivation as to why like ovums have a feature like ours. So please give me it.
Okay, finally, you finally learned what I was saying. You finally picked up my motivations, and then you actually adopted them. But that has issues with what you were saying earlier when you accused me of not understanding these sort of different categories. So initially, I told you, look, I don't see that much. I don't see a difference between the ovum and the zygote. And you said, well, I want you to motivate that. Well, if you were familiar with any sort of good faith dialogues, you'd understand that that's an indication for you to provide motivation for it. That's not a burden of shift. And I really want you to concede that point. Or I could just show you some like very low tier debates and maybe you could learn something from them. So yeah, I made the assertion I don't see that much of a distinction. I want you to provide a distinction. Rather than providing a distinction, you instead tell me to like motivate the proposition that there isn't motivation when all
You
that I had, all that I've done, it's not a falsification, it's a suspension of judgment. But even then, I can motivate the falsification with
this is
a premise-based argument. Calm down, calm down.
mm,
Not yet.
I'm very calm.
So I can motivate the argument, and I'm actually really happy that you decided to talk about chromosomes because the finite amount of chromosomes that the ovum has is actually predicted in the hypothesis that they would be the
Like
same organism because they are identical. So here's just an argument in the side chat. Ryan, just let me know which premise you disagree with for the
yeah,
proposition that
well,
they both have a future like ours.
there's a few things. So one, the initial claim wasn't that you don't see a difference. The initial claim was that if it is the case that I'm positing that the zygote is the same entity, then I would also have to posit that the ovum is the same entity as this future self because they are relevantly similar, right? So that's the sort of proposition you are affirming. So you motivating that proposition by saying, well, I don't see a difference isn't a motivation to anybody aside from yourself because maybe Lucario in his own little world just does not see any sort of like distinction between apples and oranges. That doesn't motivate anybody else to believe the view that they are identical in any sort of relevant sense. So what I was asking for and what I hoped you gave me, or you would give me, I should say, was any sort of good motivation as to why, in any sort of relevant category, that they are even remotely similar, which you have not yet done. But for the argument in the side chat, give me a second.
You just can't read.
You
And
didn't
while
send
you're
an argument
reading,
in the side
yeah,
chat of
well,
this channel. You didn't send an argument.
oh, in the side chat of this channel, really?
Yeah, no, you. This guy. I hate this guy. Oh my god.
In the side chat of this channel, if you looked, you wouldn't see an argument. How many other people? Is there any way? Like,
No,
maybe,
lag,
yeah, Corey,
lag,
could you
lag,
tag him
lag,
there?
lag, 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 lag. Chill,
Oh
chill,
my
chill.
god. But I mean, while you're reading, I guess I'll do like a sort of I'll do like an Apollo move where it's like very bad faith, and while you're down, I guess I'll start kicking you. So I'm gonna respond to what you said while you're reading. So you have like two
No,
tasks.
no, no,
Hopefully,
no, no,
hopefully you
no,
have enough
no,
gigabytes of RAM
no,
to
no,
respond to both of those
no,
tasks.
no, 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 no.
Okay.
A future like ours means Jesus Christ, like why does it have to be ordered like this? Can you put a gap between each of the premises, dude? Like, what's wrong with you?
Okay. Well, I put brackets in them so you could.
No, oh my God. Future like ours equates to the temporal. Fucking hate this guy. That some future time will have experiences like those of the average human. The average human experiences, any being that's well at something that has a future like ours, a system that preserves functional unity across time, preserves the identity of the subject across time. What's the semantics on functional unity there?
Functional unity. Do you know what a function means?
Hmm? Yeah, I know what a function is.
Okay, it's when the output values of the function are converged with the output values of another function or system.
Yeah,
That's functional.
what are these output values is what I'm asking you.
The output values could be like rationality, it could be like having two hands, it could be being a biped, being a mammal, etc., etc.
So long as it continues to have like these sort of functions or its body allows it to have these sort of functions, then it is the same entity? Is that the
Um,
claim?
no, that's not the claim.
Okay, so
Which premise are you reading?
premise three.
Okay. Sufficient for syntax yeah. Syntax maintenance of the systems.
Yeah,
And
what does that mean?
specifically the syntax okay, so you can refer to the same thing.
Yeah,
Like
okay.
you would refer to, like you would look at the zygote, you'd say, okay,
Oh,
well it
okay, no,
has,
no, no.
X amount of functions, and so
Mhm.
you can look at the embryo, even though the embryo is a combination of like the zygote and uterine wall, you can still refer to the embryo as the same thing as the zygote given the functional unity.
And what's this to know? I just want to know, okay, specifically. So if they have the same function at like multiple different time points, then they're the same entity. And this function is drum roll.
It's not just like a specific function, but for the amount of chromosomes that the ovum had by itself without the chromosomes of the sperm, those things would be preserved, and so that's expected under the hypothesis that it just is the
No,
same
I just
entity.
want to know
So
what are these
I'm
functions?
motivating, such as like having blue eyes. There you go.
Okay, hold on. So the functions, no, okay, I just want to know specifically, do you have like a list of relevant functions, even if they aren't exhaustive, some relevant functions that would need to be maintained in order for you to be the same subject over time? Because if you name me some biological function, then it's unclear how you'd be able to like, or that would just violate one-to-one identity, because multiple
Okay, this
different
is a
like subjects can also
yeah. This has
still
already been
actualize the same function. So
this has already been talked about in conclusion number two, which I don't think you even got to. You
I've
just
not
like
I've not
finished
read
the
the entire
argument.
argument.
Oh my god.
I'm not going to probably. So
Okay.
wait, so
I can like
conclusion
read it
two.
out.
If wait, hold on. If subject identity is preferred, then its mental and experiential properties are preserved over time. Yeah, okay. So if a subject's identity is preserved, then its mental and experiential properties are. Well, that's just like vague as well. When you say like its mental and like experiential properties are preserved, do you mean like okay, it has some sort of like key memories that continue to be maintained within the same subject over time?
Wait, what are you reading?
Premise four, I think. Is that premise
Premise
four?
4. Where does it
If
say mental and experiential
there is
properties?
well, okay, well, if there is syntactic identity
Where does
identified.
it say mental and
Well,
experiential
assumed
properties?
I assume that's what you're referring to because of like the typical functionalist view. But
You said that was vague when I used those terms, even though I
yeah,
didn't use
I
those
don't.
terms. It's like
What's
right
it
in
called?
front of you, man. Like, what are
If
you reading?
I'm not reading all of this in full. Wait, hold on.
Oh my god.
If no, but like I just want to know what the function is. Can you like tell me the functions? Like, are
Okay,
you?
function. Look, I already gave you a
Mhm.
plethora of functions. I can just give a plethora more, such as like second grade
No, I
biology.
don't need.
But
I don't
the
need like a
category,
plethora.
the salient category would just be
Hmm.
any function, as long as there's a finite amount of, or an existential amount of functions that are contributed between one quote unquote entity and another quote unquote entity. That's expected under the hypothesis that they share functional unity. And so that's just what the conclusion is getting at.
Hold on. That didn't really answer my question because what I wanted to know specifically was a set of relevant functions, relevant insofar as they are the most, even if like they aren't exhaustive, they are the most important for like for these functions must be maintained in order for you to remain the same entity. And I just also want to know how are you cashing out sameness here?
Sameness? What?
So when you say X and Y
Sameness
are
is what sameness is when they have an amount of, or an existential amount of shared properties.
uh, so
Sameness is different than same, like by
yeah,
itself.
no, when I say sameness, I just mean when you say two entities are the same, what do you mean?
Two When I say two entities are the same, it means they're
Hmm.
identical.
Identical insofar as like are you invoking Leibniz's law? Or?
Insofar as they share, and one entity has sufficient criteria for its identity, and another entity has sufficient criteria for that same identity, so they would be the same
Yeah,
entity.
you're still using the word same within the explanation on what same means. So
Oh, sorry, I just mean identical. So just
okay,
like replace
and
name with
how is
identical.
identity being cashed out there?
How is identity being cashed out?
Yep.
A equals A. Okay, there we go.
That does not tell me anything.
Yeah, it does.
No, no, it doesn't. If you wanted to say like,
I'm sorry
wait,
if
hold
my
on. No,
interlocutor
I was
on a
about to
discussion of
explain.
if my
I was about
interlocutor
to
doesn't
explain
know
to you.
what same and
No,
identity means,
no,
then
no, no. Look,
I'm not
I'm
gonna
about to
lie.
respond to this in 4 seconds or you hate Jews. Yes, I do. Anyways, but what's it called? Look, it's like if I said that, for example, I and Court are the same or identical, right? And then by identical, I meant that, oh, well, like Leibniz's law, so we need to have all of the same properties. Well, obviously, on that view of identity, right, we wouldn't have all of the same properties, therefore, we wouldn't be the same entity. Or if you're invoking some relative
And
identity
that's
view,
why I didn't say
wait,
that you
hold
need
on.
all the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
properties.
okay. So if you're invoking some relative identity view, then they would need to be identical insofar as some specific sortal, right? So that's why I'm asking you what these sortals are, and then you haven't been able to tell me what these sortals are, right? And
Wait, that's
they
sort.
wouldn't be the same sortal if they don't have all of the same, like, and it kicks the can down the road because how do
Wait,
you claim they're the
that's
same
already
sortal if
what
they don't share all of
wait,
the same
that's already
properties?
that's already what I told you. Like you could say it's a different entity in the sense that one of them just has more chromosomes, but it would be the same entity in a teleonomic sense.
Hmm? In the
It would
that
be the same entity in the in the biological function sense, because that's
biological
what teleometry
function
is.
meaning?
By identifying what a biological entity is. So any carbon-based system that picks up maybe more functions and maybe drops some functions, as long as it has the salient functions, then it would be the same biological carbon-based system.
Yeah, that's just again, maybe it's just like a difference in terms of understanding. But like when you say that they have the same salient functions, or are you just telling me that the sort of easily identifiable properties in which both of them have would be identical? Because then I'm unsure why that would be enough to ground identity between the two. Like, surely you can imagine a case of like, imagine like I don't know, I clone your physical body, but one of these bodies is a violent rapist, like Yas's brother, right? And the other, but they're still actualizing the same sort of functions insofar as they're doing the same sort of things within your body. Would you now say that that's like sufficient in terms of saying that both of you are the same people?
You're using pronouns there, which invokes personal identity. I'm not talking about personal identity. I'm just talking about carbon-based identity.
Yeah, carbon-based identity meaning that over time you are still actualizing the same function, yes, biological function.
Well, you say you there, but no, I mean I wouldn't use a pronoun there. I could
The
say it's
entity,
using this. I could say
it's
it's
yes,
using the same. Yeah.
yes, okay. I just use them interchangeably whenever I'm speaking of them. So, like,
Yeah, that's a
again,
blunder.
it's a I don't care, or they them. Who fucking cares, bro? Dickhead. Anyways, right. But look, also if you're just saying that it is the same insofar as like they're actualizing the same function, you can imagine I clone the same biological entity. If both of them are actualizing the same biological function, but I wouldn't say that they're both the same entity because then the statements like, oh yeah, it is in Germany and not in Germany at the same time would still be true because the same there would be still be some function in both of these different countries which is identical being actualized
That looks
in
like a
two
different
different
function.
places. Hmm?
That looks like a different function.
Why would it be a different function?
Oh, because you cloned it, and there's another function right there that
And
occupies
by
space-time coordinates.
by virtue, okay, so there are different functions by virtue of their space-time coordinates.
Yeah. I mean, that's just one of the many reasons why
Well,
it's
so I'm
different.
also like it's like say for example some like flesh clone or some ovum and compare it to a grown man. Both of them, even if they're actualizing the same function, they're actualizing it in different
And this
spatial
is supposed to
locations.
contend. Just
So they
look. Just tell
so
me
they
which
still so
premise
they
of the
even under
argument this
your
even
own view.
disagrees with.
No, even on no, I'm trying to critique the view on like your functional account of of identity, and I'm telling you that even on your own view,
And which premise would that
the
falsify?
ovum,
And which
the
premise would that
entire.
falsify?
Okay, hold on. Give me a second. Let me look at this thing. It would falsify premise for any sort of premise which invokes ideas of functional unity about like or to like determine identity would all immediately be falsified. Right. So
If there's syntactic identity preservation, then wait, that doesn't falsify premise 4 at all. That would
no,
just like maybe
oh my
disagree with the
god.
antecedent. And in
Hmm?
fact, no, actually, not no, that doesn't even. Okay, that so premise
If
4 conveniently doesn't even
functional unity of a system is a sufficient criterion for the
look.
syntax maintenance of a subject or for your system subject relation to predicates.
What are you? Which premise are you reading? You can join
Premise
two of them.
three. Premise three.
Okay, okay, so not premise. Okay, there we go. Functional unity of a system is sufficient criterion for syntax maintenance of a system's subject relation to predicates. Yeah, and you disagree with that?
Yes.
Okay, well, when I talk about a system, I was pretty much talking about the functions, and if there's functional unity, it's the same system, carbon-based, with a finite amount of functions in it. I'm not interested if you like invoke personal identity to something as a reductio, because that's not a salient category. Oh wait, is he here? Oh, he's definitely. And I just want to clarify again. This is all me accepting a burden that I didn't even have. I just want a motivation for why they're different. This is like me being extra charitable, but I'm pretty sure he has a limited time, so I want to get somewhere productive. I might like stop the charitability. I might stop. Oh, he has to go. I guess I'll give like a victory speech. Um, Basically in this conversation, my interlocutor tried to motivate the pro-life view by saying that the zygote had a soul. His semantics of soul were really weird. He had to update them when I told them that they were really weird. And when we had the update, it seemed inclusive of the ovum as well. He didn't motivate why it doesn't. In fact, what we gave, in fact, what we got from him was him admitting that, well, maybe it does have a soul, or whatever accent he uses. Um, that's a, I mean, I think that's enough for any burdens that I had. And then even I accepted another burden that I didn't have. I gave an argument for why here's why it's likely the same thing. There's chromosomal contribution. I mean, that's like one property that's vicarious. So